Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani and welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism and narcissistic relationships and how to cope and heal from these relationships. And today, let's go a little bit counterintuitive and let's talk about what isn't narcissism. I gotta tell you folks, if the internet had been a student in one of my classrooms back in my professorial days, it would have gotten a C- for poor critical thinking. This has been one of those weeks when I got handwritten hate mail, which always has horror film vibes, because anyone who writes hate mail by hand always has horror film writing. Or the obsessive trolls who can't let go of yammering on about NPD as diagnosis and we're being mean to people with NPD. And we're more examples of the fact that people actually aren't listening, and I think they just want to hear their tirades. No matter how many times I try to describe it, to make it clear, it doesn't seem to be working. So I'm just going to keep trying. Now, most people, especially people who are surviving these relationships, are not antagonistic themselves. Some are, but most aren't. Basically, you're nice people going through narcissistic relationships. The nice people going through this stuff seem to understand the subtleties. I think it's the people who might have sort of some of the narcissistic vibes are the ones who are struggling with this. But let's understand what narcissism is by understanding what it's not. I'm going to give some examples I've given in the past. So here we go. And this is what I used to do when I teach. I'd say, you want to know what this is? And I'd ask them to answer essays. Tell me what it's not. So folks, if I put a tomato in front of you, would you think I just gave you a slice of pizza? If I put a tire in front of you, would you think I just gave you a car? The tomato and the tire are integral parts of their wholes, of pizza, of cars. However, they aren't those things. And that tomato could be found as part of a salad or a sandwich. That tire could be part of an airplane or a swing in a garden. My point is, one thing doesn't designate the whole, and that one thing can be part of other wholes. So using that syllogism as our base, let's break down what narcissism is not. Just as a framework for something to be narcissism or any other personality style, not disorder, style, it's never just one thing. It's several things that hang together that are all happening most of the time and across lots of situations that are maladaptive and rigid. At the core of it is the narcissistic person is insecure. They have variable, low, or performative empathy. They're not capable of sustained, mutual, respectful, and deep relationships. They have a shallow sense of self. Got it? That's the core. Maybe that's the crust of the pizza, the chassis of the car. But the mistake people make is to get over-focused on the stuff I'm about to talk about and then yammer on about how someone's narcissistic or antagonistic or toxic because they're one of these things. The things I'm about to talk about are the tomato. Many of these together are the tomato, the crust, and the cheese, okay? So let's talk about the number one thing narcissism is not. It's not just arrogance and bragging. It's the tire and the car again, right? All narcissistic people are arrogant. Not all arrogant people are narcissistic. People may brag or even behave arrogantly because they're socially anxious. It may be cultural, it may be social, it may even be part of the industry they work in. In rare cases, people are arrogant because they actually do have the goods or because they're posturing maybe to close a sale or a negotiation. Now, if that person who is arrogant and bragging happens to also be able to tune into other people in a warm and genuine way, they're self-reflective and they know what they're doing, right? They're not trying to psych someone out, but they're actually a nice person. That may not be narcissism. You got to spend more time with someone before, just because you met an arrogant person, it doesn't mean they're narcissistic. Number two, narcissism is not just entitlement. Entitlement sucks. I think it is a deeply, deeply unattractive characteristic. I am disgusted by the call the manager nightmares and the parking lot bullies who believe they can park up front no matter whom it inconveniences, who believe they don't or should not have rules on them or placed on their families or their kids. They are terrible. However, believe it or not, sometimes that entitlement Still terrible, but it could be a product of privilege. In fact, that entitled person may actually treat some people kind of well. They may actually treat their employees well or their family well, or basically treat well anyone who isn't making them wait for a latte. They may just be those people who are so insulated by wealth that they are perplexed by real world stuff. Again, not an attractive characteristic by itself, but by itself, entitlement is not narcissism. Number 3, narcissism is not just cheating and infidelity. If I had a dime for every person who said, my partner cheated on me, he's a narcissist. Might be, but then again, maybe not. Infidelity and betrayal are correlated with narcissism. That's true. But someone cheating can be symptomatic of lots of stuff, more than I can get into here. And that's going to vary from relationship to relationship. It's not nice to cheat. I'm never going to be a cheater apologist. No way. It's a betrayal. It hurts the other person. But not all cheaters are narcissistic. And people often jump right there without doing the deeper dive on the other patterns within the person. That's a dangerous precedent. So, number 4, it's not just selfishness. Again, we're back to the tire. All cars need tires. All narcissistic people are egocentric, but selfishness is not a slam dunk. There are people who make choices in their lives that mean that they get to be egocentric. They choose not to have kids or not even to have a relationship. You may think that they're selfish in terms of how they live or the choices they make, but they may have actually and intentionally constructed a life that lets them do what they want without necessarily hurting other people. I'm not so sure that's selfish. Selfishness doesn't always hurt other people, so we need to be careful about how we frame that and not view narcissism and selfishness as synonymous. Number 5, narcissism is not just monopolizing conversations. Listen, some people just like to hold court. This actually happened to me recently. A seemingly nice enough guy, but holy heaven above, he could not shut up in a group conversation. Literally everything. Everything was about a trip he took, a concert he saw, the time this happened to him or that happened. After a while, honest to God, my eyes glazed over. I couldn't surmise whether this guy was doing this, whether he was lonely, socially anxious, socially unskilled, or just really boring and couldn't pick up on social cues. Because at other times I saw him, especially in passing, he was very warm, very responsive, though he did kind of think of himself as the expert, and he happened to be a very powerful dude who was often surrounded by yes people. Did I leave that experience with Mr. Conversation Hijacker? Did I leave thinking he was narcissistic? No. I'd never sit next to him at dinner again, but I didn't think he was narcissistic. Number 6. If somebody gaslights you just one time, that's not narcissism. We have all possibly gaslighted someone once, probably more than once. Hopefully you don't do it again. Maybe a friend said to you, hey, you didn't give me money for the plane ticket, and you said, yes, I did, but you didn't. You remembered wrong. And your friend said, no, I'm looking at my bank thing, you didn't. And you're getting frustrated now and saying, yes, I gave it to you. Gosh, you're so weird about money. But then you come to find out you didn't. And it's because you threw in that frustrated, you're weird about money part, that's what made it gaslighting. If, however, you caught yourself and said, oh, very quickly, oh my gosh, I just checked and no, I didn't send it. I am so sorry. I had no right to react like that. I'm sorry if I hurt you. Then that's not the kind of gaslight that matters. But also, you don't get to keep doing it. Next time, stop and think before you respond. Whether out of stress or impatience we do this and we catch it, those kinds of gaslights are probably not going to register as narcissistic. It's when it's a pattern with zero accountability that we might sit up straighter and wonder, is this in a larger pattern that would be explained by narcissism? Number 7, narcissism is not being on social media and caring about likes. Listen, yes, social media is the source of many societal ills, but it doesn't cause narcissism, and not everyone on social media is narcissistic. And even if someone cares about it and spends time on it, that doesn't make them narcissistic. If your 50-year-old spouse spends hours scrolling through Instagram and liking people's cat pictures and pictures of the eggs Benedict they had at the beach, and they like to post their own goofy inspirational quotes, and they like that people like them, that's a little bit immature. Maybe it's a little bit superficial. But if that same cat picture liker is also a decent person who is empathic and nice, that's not narcissism. When I watch people scroll through social media, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of how people used to thumb through inane magazines once upon a time. Just because it was made out of paper doesn't make a magazine more virtuous. Social media just happens to be a magazine. The people on the pages of the magazine happen to be people you know. It's how a person uses social media to interact with others and manages themselves. Maybe that relates to narcissism, but you're going to need a lot more than someone's on social media to call it narcissism. Narcissism's not just vanity. No, getting cosmetic surgery does not make someone narcissistic, nor does spending thousands of dollars on designer clothes or wanting to exercise frequently to have a great physique or caring about how they look. Those things are not narcissism. It may feel vapid or annoying or just uninteresting, but those things are not narcissism. We shame people for being overweight. We shame people for being old. We shame people for being not attractive. We shame people for being attractive. We shame people who get work done. That's actually the problem. If a vanity-focused person loves the look and the makeup and the whole thing, if they're a decent, self-aware, empathic, nice person, then okay, great. Fine, not narcissistic. If that vanity-focused person thinks they're better than other people because they have nicer shoes or mock people who don't have flat abs, then maybe we're kind of lurking closer to exploring whether or not someone has an antagonistic personality, such as narcissism. Listen, if you've ever been a betting person, the analogy I'm about to use will make sense. But the more of these things a person has, the more confidently you can make a bet that the person who you're dealing with may be narcissistic, okay? Even having one of the things of those things that I said, it's just that thing by itself doesn't make narcissism, but having one of them can up the odds, but it's not a slam dunk. And the easy breezy way people are using this word, narcissism, is problematic. Minimizing the experience of people who are enduring toxic relationships and creating more confusion and rancor amongst people who are actually experiencing the depth and breadth of a relationship characterized by invalidation and manipulation is what happens when we use this word wrong. Most of the things on the list I just shared with you, the things that narcissism is not these things by themselves, they're not great, but they bother us differently. And it's important that we are all careful to not oversimplify this nuanced dynamic of narcissism. And please, please, please stop talking about narcissistic personality disorder unless you've been trained as a diagnostician. Thanks again.